Serena, welcome to the Self-StartHER Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Megan. I am super excited to finally be here. I know I rescheduled like a few times, so thank you for
You
your
know what?
patience.
You're a business owner and you're a mom. Life happens. If anyone gets it, it's me. So I'm glad that we're finally able to connect and just learn all things about money today. But I have to say, what I find is really interesting is as I was doing a little bit of digging on you, I saw that you actually don't consider yourself, I'm going to use air quotes here, but a numbers nerd. So your entire business is about numbers. So I'd love to just start by first understanding a little bit more about you, your business, and how you ended up taking this path, even though you're not that kind of quote unquote numbers nerd.
Yeah, I love that you found that. I don't know where it exists, but I know it exists out there. Um, so I actually started off as well. I don't know how far back in the journey you want to go, but I became a young mom at 19. And so I went directly from high school straight into college because where I grew up, there is this thing called the lottery scholarship. And it pays your tuition if you go straight from high school into a state college in the same state, it's New Mexico. And so I was like, well, I've got to do something with my life to provide for my daughter. So I'm just going to go straight to college since my tuition will be paid. And so that's what I did. And since I had a baby at home, I was like, well, obviously, I want to have a flexible schedule and be able to work the same hours that my kids in school. So I went for a teaching degree. So that was my original major was elementary education. And when I got to the point in the program where we were supposed to be doing like observations and creating lesson plans and all that, it was a lot. It was a really heavy load. I was also working 20 to 30 hours a week at a local grocery store to help make ends meet, and also having to do all these extra hours of the education curriculum. So it was like more than a regular load at school because of all the additional stuff that had to happen. And honestly, it's like a teaching degree takes like 5 years. I don't know if most people know that, but it's not just a 4-year degree. It takes a lot longer because of all the extras. And so I was working in this grocery store in the office, mainly working on doing the daily deposits and counting the money and then paying the vendors for all the product we were selling. And my supervisor was like, "You're really good at this. Like, you never have errors, you're super accurate, and you're really fast." And I was like, "Okay." And she was like, "Have you thought about taking some accounting class?" And I was like, "No, but it sounds pretty cool." So I did. I enrolled in 2 accounting classes that next semester. And I absolutely fell in love with it because it was so easy to me. It wasn't like it was something I fell in love with because of like it gave me purpose or anything. I didn't think I was going to find that in there. I was just like, I just need something that is easy enough for me to do. And I'm going to be able to finish my degree within 4 years instead of 5. And I already am working in the industry. So like I started actually looking into the accounting career path and realized like actually it pays really well. Like this is a smart move. So I went for it. I switched my major, finished my accounting degree, continued working at that store. Shortly after, maybe like a year after that, after I switched my major, I hadn't graduated yet. But the finance manager, who was my supervisor, she had been like mentoring me and teaching me everything she was doing, like running the financial statements, presenting them to the board, preparing the budget, going through audits, all this stuff. And one day I came into the store and there was a manila envelope on my desk with the keys to the store, the credit cards, and the checkbook, and a note from my finance manager that she resigned and she's appointing me in her position. And I was like, oh, okay, this is happening. So I think I had like a year left of my degree. The board of directors were pretty supportive of letting me step into that role, but they kind of put me through the ringer. They hired a CPA to come overlook everything that I was doing and make sure I was doing it correctly. And then they asked me to start presenting the financials at the board and all that. And it was so nerve wracking. I was like 20 years old, 22 years old or something. And so like new to this whole world, but I did it and they let me stay as the finance manager. But then when I graduated, I decided to move away. So I left that position and started working at a CPA firm. So that's how I got into accounting.
Wow, what an incredible opportunity that I don't want to say it was given to you because you earned it, but that kind of fell onto your lap because you you decide or you found out that you had a knack for this. It necessarily, I liked what you said. It didn't really fuel like the passion side of you. It wasn't like your purpose, but you were good at it and it came easy to you. And I think, especially as women, we think that we need to be lit up all the time by what we're doing. And that's not necessarily always the case. Like sometimes the things that come easy to us might be the path to take, and then find outside factors to be able to kind of fuel that passion as well. I know you and I were talking about before we hit record your music background.
Yeah.
So it's like being able to combine the things that come easy to you with your passions at the same point here. What great experience too that you were given at this grocery store to be able to have such a high-powered role and responsibility at a really young age, and also to have those insights from a financial perspective into such a large operation, I would say.
Yeah.
That's a really, really great opportunity that you were given that most people don't ever get access to.
Yeah, and that is like I'm fully aware of like that being such an awesome opportunity that kind of, yeah, it was like I was in the right place at the right time and following, the signs that were leading me towards these things, because it's like I could have been like, no, I don't want to take accounting. I'm not interested. That's not my path. But like staying open to different possibilities is always a good thing.
And
I'm really glad I had that foresight.
that and making decisions because you also had a family to support. And when you become a mom, it's not just about you anymore. Like you have a little mouth to feed and to put food on the table for. So you're making decisions for the both of you. So, and I think that's what's really cool about your story already, and just the small amount of time, is that you've made decisions not only for yourself, but also for your family, what's going to benefit just the greater good of everyone. And I'm pretty sure, again, stalker Megan over here, based on all the research that I've done, I think that there's a theme here that we'll dive into in a little bit. But you mentioned you eventually left the area and you went to work at a CPA firm. So let's dive into kind of your experience there.
Yeah. So I truly believe that experience at the grocery store is what has set me up for every other move in my career path, because I don't know if a lot of people ran into this, but when you go to get a job and you don't have any experience, like people don't want to hire you, but you need the experience to just move forward. And so like a lot of people get stuck in that conundrum. And I built that experience while I was in college, thankfully. So it made me a really good candidate in getting future jobs because I had a longer job history than most people my age. And so that was really crucial. I stepped into a full charge bookkeeper position at a CPA firm, and I was basically making peanuts. It's so funny. I moved to Tucson, Arizona, and I was staying with my best friend for a while, and she was a bartender, and I was like so excited when I got the job at the CPA firm. She's like, "How much are they going to pay you?" And I was like, $30,000 a year. And she was like, "What? You have a degree and you're going to get paid $30,000 a year?" And I was stoked because that was more than I had ever been paid before. And I was getting benefits and stuff. And she was like, "I make that in like 6 months bartending." And I was like, "Well, this is where I'm at." So I took the job, worked there for a couple years. That's the only stint I've done in taxes. And so I do have a CPA license, but I don't practice tax because I only have a couple years of experience in it, and that it just wasn't fun for me. So the accounting profession has a lot of different avenues that you can take. And I decided to stay pretty much after that point. It's to stay in industry, which means just working in an accounting department within a business. And so after my 2 years there, I moved to San Diego and started working in manufacturing in the accounting department and got a lot of good experience there. And then I moved over into biotech. And that is where I really got to take everything that I'd learned so far and build an entire accounting department, because it was a startup. And I was like the second person in the accounting department. So it was like me and the director of finance, basically. And so I got to hire people as the company grew, build out the accounting department. And eventually I ended up as corporate controller for a multi-million-dollar biotech company. So, and then I got pregnant with my second daughter and took maternity leave. And that's the point where I decided I didn't want to ever have to go back to corporate. I wanted to figure out a way to have that actual flexible schedule with my kids because I worked through my entirety of raising my first one. I was in college and working and then studying for the CPA and working and doing all this stuff to move up in my career. And she was in daycare and after school care and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't want to do that again. I want to be able to be here with my daughter, with my second daughter and my first. So she was 10 at that point. And so that's when I started freelancing when I left corporate to build something up. Luckily, I had a partner that was paying the bills. So I am very fortunate that it wasn't like all on me at that point. But yeah, so that's what I did. I started freelance bookkeeping and getting jobs on Upwork. And then eventually those clients would refer me to other clients, and my business just kind of exploded from there.
Well, I definitely want to dive into how your business exploded here, but we have a similar story as far as like we were climbing the corporate ladder, we were doing really well, and then we get pregnant and we decide that, you know what, this kind of path that I thought I wanted is no longer what I want. I want to be home so I can be present with my children here. So I'm curious from just your standpoint, because you were in a very high powered position to be a corporate controller is it's not a low job. We'll put it that way. You were making way more than that 30 grand that
Yeah,
you
at
initially
that
were
point,
starting with.
yes.
Yes. So how did you, you said you had a supportive partner, so that obviously helps, but how did you walk away from something that was so secure and financially stable? And also that title is very admirable as well.
Yeah, and that was like the title I was working so hard to get to all those years. Like that was the ultimate, not quite the ultimate. I think at one point I thought that I wanted to become a CFO, but then once I worked in that position as the controller and saw what the actual CFO had to deal with, I was like, you know what? I'm good right here. I don't really want to do like fundraising and do that whole thing and be ultimately responsible for everybody. So yeah, I pretty much was only in that role for about a year before I left. Um, and it was a huge adjustment because I went from before meeting that partner, I was a single mom and doing everything on my own, earning everything and just very career driven. And then I took a complete like turned total 180 and was like, now I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom. And I thought that that was like, it's not that it wasn't what I wanted, but it was very different from what I expected, I guess. And so I was still glad and very appreciative to be able to do that, but I felt like I worked so hard to get where I was, and am I just throwing it away? And like it was a whole shift of all these things and managing my own money, going to like and then moving over to like not managing the money of the household and being one of the dependents basically was a very very difficult shift to make, to be honest. And so that was part of the reason why I started freelancing, because I was like, I don't like asking for money or having those conversations because I've never had to do that before. And so I'm just going to do this so that I have money to spend and not feel guilty about.
I can completely relate because I was making a very comfortable salary on my own and was very independent. Went and purchased my own condo before we were married and everything, and then decided, well, there's a whole story there that I'll save all the juicy details, but we decided to have me stay at home too for childcare purposes because it's so expensive to put your
Yeah,
kids.
it doesn't make sense for a
No,
lot of people to actually keep working financially.
since especially I'm in California. I don't know
That's
what
where
the
I was
prices
too.
are in Arizona,
Yeah. At
but
that point, we were in California, and I was like, I would be spending, because I remember talking to
shoot.
women in my department, and I was like, how much do you guys pay for daycare? And she was like, oh, 2/3 of my salary goes to paying for childcare. And I was like, why do you even work? I wouldn't work at that point. We would just cut back and stay home.
Well, and that's what we've done. And because it's one of those questions like, well, do I continue climbing the corporate ladder and like put my money towards someone else raising my kid or the vice versa? But
Mhm.
it is difficult to talk to you like what your point was is that you did go and get a really great education and you've worked to build yourself to that level because you were striving for the controller position. And I've had thoughts like, okay, if I were to go back, does that mean I have to start at the bottom? So it's definitely very eye opening and life changing as you make this transition just from personal experience. But it sounds like you then took it a step further, because there's nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home mom, but you wanted to be able to take back some of that control that you did have and no longer have to maybe be a little bit more budget conscious or to ask to have these conversations around money. You decided to start freelancing, which is amazing. So you mentioned that you started turning to Upwork and Fiverr, and I think you mentioned a couple others, but I'm not as familiar with them. So talk to me about how you decided to go about this entire process.
Yeah, so it actually started because it had been about almost a year since I had been staying home. And it's like once you get out of that first year fog, that's when I was like, okay, I think I can handle like adding something. And since I had left corporate, I had decided to let my CPA license go inactive. And in order to, and then, to keep it active, you have to do continuing education. And so if you're going to reactivate your license, you have to do all that continuing education you missed out on. So basically, I had to do 80 hours of continuing education before they would reinstate my license. And I went back and forth to like, should I like keep it active or not? Like, and just keep up on the CPEs or whatever. Like, because either way, in California, it was the same price to maintain an inactive license as an active one. They still charge you the same fee every 2 years. The only difference is that you don't have to do CPE if you're inactive, but then you can't say you're a CPA. So I was like, well, I'm just going to go ahead and reactivate it. And so I started doing on like free CPE courses online, and most of those are directed and presented by, like, all the free ones are presented by software companies that are helping CPA firms and like various different things within the accounting. And so I was like, well, I don't want to pay for CPA. I'm just going to take these free ones. And so I started learning about all this different technology that is out there than what we were exposed to in corporate, because our processes were just so different with the big ERP systems and things weren't on the cloud. And so I was like, wow, it just opened my eyes to this whole different world and possibilities of I could actually do this from home and still be home with my kids and like create a flexible schedule if I'm just working with a couple clients. And so like that was really the catalyst to actually going into doing bookkeeping, because I was like, well, I want to do something with my time, but I don't really know what, but I'm just going to reactivate my license and see what happens. And it just kind of, again, like being open to the possibilities of like, oh, there's all these new technologies available that enable this type of stuff to be just done remotely nowadays. And so it kind of like sparked this little, like, I could do this from home and I can help people all across the US, and I don't have to actually like go in person and meet people. I don't have to have a physical office and all this cool stuff. So that's kind of what started that. And then the other aspect of it is like about a year into just kind of freelancing and working with just a handful of clients, I was in these Facebook groups of other bookkeepers, and I kept seeing people ask the same questions that I had when I had started this journey of like, well, what do I ask a client for information that they need? And like, how do I get access to this stuff? And like, how do I onboard a client? And what should I be doing every month? And I had some of that background from just working in accounting and working at a CPA firm, but like, it just was like, it would have been really nice to be able to just like have a checklist of all these things that someone needs to start their bookkeeping business. And so I created that because I was like sharing all that in the comments in these Facebook posts and groups. Then the other side of my business, well, now it's a secondary business, I split them apart several years ago, is mentoring other accountants and bookkeepers to start their own businesses. So people like me leaving corporate, maybe wanting to do a side hustle, and bookkeepers that maybe don't have an accounting background. And so I help people in those worlds. And so that's my other brand, the Ambitious Bookkeeper. And so, yeah, I have two businesses now because I couldn't just stop with one. And yeah, that's how that happened.
Well, and I think it's really smart that you put yourself into the rooms, even if they were virtual rooms with people that are having these conversations, to be able to understand, okay, what is it that my ideal client is looking for? And they needed, or what you found is that there were the same questions across the board. So you were able to create different products based on what these needs were. And I know for me, I don't want to say it quite this way, but I'm just going to say it. Like, I'm kind of money stupid in some ways, which is funny because my mom was a CPA. She's now retired. And my dad was also in the financial services industry. So my parents both came from like financial backgrounds. And I just always was taught, just pay off your credit cards every single month. Like you'll be fine. Like always make sure you don't spend more than
Then
you
you make.
make,
Yeah.
things like that. But I don't know all the things that go into, especially from a business perspective, what it takes to run a financially sound business. I know that there's some things that you really like to, or some themes that you saw clearly, because we were just talking about that people needed to know in. So, what are some like money basics that we would really need to know as business owners to make sure that we're running a profitable business here?
Yeah. So, first off, if you are a new business owner, the best first step that you can take is to open a separate bank account. And it sounds really simple, but it will make your life so much easier than trying to sift through your personal bank account to figure out which expenses were for business and which income was for business and all of that. So, step one, open a separate bank account. Even if it's just another personal account at the same bank, as long as you're just using a separate bank account for all of your business transactions. That means depositing the money that you're getting from your business into that account and only paying things out of that account for business purposes. Your tax pro will help you, or will hopefully will help you, but they will also thank you. They'll love you at tax time, not having to sift through all of your personal transactions, and you'll appreciate it too. So that would be number one. Number two is to have a system of keeping track of that besides just looking at your bank account. So whether that is a spreadsheet or a software like QuickBooks or Xero, my preference is Xero. Either of those work. There's also other options out there, but also if you have a very simple and straightforward business model where maybe you're working with a handful of clients one-on-one every month, and so you're only getting a few payments and you don't have a lot of like expenses that you're paying out, a spreadsheet is just fine. Like, I don't want anyone to ever think that like you have to sign up for QuickBooks, because if you don't know what you're doing in QuickBooks, that's just going to stress you out even more, where almost everyone I think knows how to operate a spreadsheet. Like you literally just put your income on one tab and your expenses on another. And the difference between the two is your profit or loss.
Now, question for you on that too. Like I've been using Expensify to keep track of my things. Is that something that's in the same realm of QuickBooks and Xero?
Yeah, I haven't looked into Expensify recently, so I don't know what they have on the side of like recording income, but it's absolutely a great way to record at least expenses so you know what you're spending on, and it probably categorizes it for you into different buckets. And so that's helpful for making decisions and understanding where your money is going, right? That's the other piece of all of this. It's not just for taxes. You want to be able to understand how much you're making and what you're spending and where you need to make changes, right? So if you're not looking at that on a monthly basis, you're not really going to know what you should be doing if you need to make changes.
Well, I definitely need to start going back on a monthly basis because I'm guilty of not doing that. And when I look at how much I've been spending overall, and because everything adds up, if you think about all the different services and the different software platforms that you're a part of, every little bit adds up. Just kind of like it's like going out to eat, you don't think
Right?
about it when you just kind of slide that credit card and then you get the bill, you go, oh my goodness, what did I do?
Yeah.
So it's great
Yeah.
to evaluate it on that monthly basis, like you were mentioning.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't like beat yourself up about, I'm sure there's listeners that are in the same boat. Like, don't beat yourself up about not doing it every month. Like, but when you think about it, like just get back on track. It's kind of the same as personal finance. So like if you're into like budgeting on your personal side, sometimes I look at my app. I use Rocket Money for that, where you can link all of your personal credit cards and bank accounts and everything. Sometimes I'm really good at looking at my budget, and other months I'm not. And like it's the months where I know I'm spending a lot that I don't want to look.
I can relate.
I'm like, I'll just look at that later because you don't want to face it. But yeah, we all deal with that. It's like it's just money is an emotional thing too. So that's the other thing, is like don't shame yourself about it. Just pick up where you left off and get back on the horse and try again.
Ain't that the truth? So you mentioned that the first step would be to open a bank account. And then the second one would be to create a system of tracking all of these different expenses.
Yeah. Yeah, and with that, like tracking for tax purposes, obviously is probably people's most, important reason for that. And with that, there's actually requirements by the IRS to have a system for tracking, whether it's on pen and paper, a spreadsheet, or a software. They want, if you are running a business, you are supposed to have a system for tracking everything besides just your bank account and bank statements. So they also want you keeping documentation for everything, receipts, records of income. So if people are paying you by check, make a copy of the check before you deposit it. Nowadays, everyone can mobile deposit, so you have the digital record of it anyway, but that way you also know like where that money came from and what it was for. So that's all proof that the IRS wants you to keep. And that's one of the that's one of the things that it's always an education point when clients come on board with us of like, what am I supposed to keep and what do I not have to keep? And I always err on the side of like, keep as much as possible. And it doesn't have to be kept in paper. You can scan it in. There's great tools out there for that. Like if you're using Expensify, you can upload receipts. QuickBooks, you can upload receipts. Pretty much every system out there that's designed for bookkeeping will have an option for uploading receipts so that you don't have to really manage them by paper anymore. But highly recommend anything over $75 you should have a receipt for. And make sure that you keep those, organized so that if you were ever audited, it's easy enough for you to go back through and find what needs to be found. But the bank statements are not enough documentation for the IRS. And that's something that is like a common misconception. It's like, well, I have the bank statement and Amex shows that it's a airline ticket and Amex shows that it's a meal, but they don't care because that doesn't tell you if that was actually for business purposes, but your receipts will show you what's actually been purchased. And, if it is reasonable and necessary and ordinary in that profession, then you're good to go.
Now, it's always good to kind of cover your bases here. And you, as the accountant and the bookkeeper, you obviously can only do so much. You are provided all this information and then you make sense of it for your clients. But it is, let's say that I'm your client, it is my responsibility to keep track of all of this, and organization methods like come into play here. And I know for myself, I haven't done a good enough job at doing this on a monthly basis. And sometimes when tax time comes around, you're scrambling to get everything under control. So are there any different systems? Like, do you recommend, I mean, you said to check your money on a monthly basis, but do you also recommend potentially like uploading everything as it comes in or once a month, or what do you typically?
I personally, my methodology is to actually take pictures of stuff exactly like when it happens. So if it's a physical receipt, if I'm out to lunch with a client or I'm traveling for business, as soon as I write that tip on the receipt, I take a photo of it and then I just leave it there. I use a tool called HubDoc because it integrates with Xero and it pulls it into the system so we can match it up with the transaction. And that way I don't ever have to worry about like sitting down once a month to take pictures. Like if a receipt comes in through my inbox, I automatically just forward it to HubDoc. If it's a physical receipt, I take a picture right into the HubDoc app. And so then I don't have to worry about it. That's what works best for my personality, to do things as they come. Some people prefer to sit down once a month to do all of it at once, but that requires staying really organized throughout the month so you don't lose everything.
And that's what I was going to say. It's super easy for things to slip through the cracks that way. So
Yeah.
just to be able to be on top of it, it makes sense to do it in the moment
Yeah.
when it's fresh, top of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't have, like, if you're going to be tracking everything in a spreadsheet and you're not going to be using a system that has something that you can upload, you can absolutely just keep a folder on your camera roll for receipts or take a picture and then upload it to Google Drive. You don't have to, like, it doesn't have to be complicated as long as you have the records.
Records are basically the holy grail, right?
Yeah.
You never want to get audited, but if you are, you want to be able to cover your bases here, make sure that you're protecting yourself and your family. So besides these two different steps here, I know that you also help your clients with different financial ways that they can grow their business. So what are some ways that we can potentially like take a look at our business and think about strategies to be able to help us grow it from a monetary standpoint moving forward?
Yeah. Well, step one, to be able to grow something, you've got to track it to see where you're at currently. So make sure you get that bookkeeping in place and get some reports or something from it. Like I said, if you're working from a spreadsheet, you're just going to take your income minus your expenses, and that's your net profit or loss, also known as your net income. There's lots of terms for things, but that's the number that you want to be looking at every month, at least, like your net profit. Depending on your business model, like if you're in a launch model and you like are only launching once a quarter, look at it on a quarterly basis as well. So, because things look a little bit different. But yeah, looking at your net profit and then taking that as a percentage of your revenue. So divide your profit by your revenue, and that'll give you a percentage. That's your profit margin. And that's a really good number to also be tracking so that you can see if your percentage is growing or shrinking as your business grows. So, in your first couple of years of business, maybe you have like 5 clients, pretty consistent income. And then your third year of business, your income, your revenue doubles because you get a bunch more clients, but then you also end up having to hire people, contractors. So that is also more expenses. Well, if you run that profit percentage at the end of that, you can see if like your profit percentage is still the same or if it's shrinking. And you can make decisions based on that too. So it's like, well, if my profit margin was 50% when I was a solopreneur, and now that I've hired people, it's like 20%, what can I do to make that profit margin bigger? And that's when strategies like raising your prices come into play, maybe cutting back on some expenses that you have, if there's anything that you can cut back on, like traveling or courses or coaching. Or yeah, the other thing is just finding ways to increase your revenue. So raising prices is one way. Another way is increasing the volume, right? So depending on your business model, if you are offering services, when you bring on more clients, you're also going to have more people to do the work if you have a team or you're doing it yourself. So that's not always the most sustainable way to grow. So then you look at, well, can we add anything that's more leveraged, like a course or a product or something like that, so that it's not necessarily taking man hours, but that's another way to add to your revenue. And then another thing to look at is to just optimize your operations. So maybe your expenses are higher because you're hiring people to do manual tasks that could be automated, or you just need to create more standard operating procedures so people are more efficient. So there's lots of different ways within that to actually grow your profit. That stuff is what I love geeking out on. And that's when I say like, that's not really a numbers thing. It's more of a strategy thing. So it's like having the ideas and helping people come up with like, how can I increase my revenue? And brainstorming together is really fun.
So I have to ask, obviously you went through these exercises as you were building and growing your business. And I know that you actually have a team that works with you now. What, other than hiring a team, like what other strategies did you put in place as you were kind of going through everything that you just mentioned?
Yeah. So bookkeeping services obviously is like, it's a one-on-one service. So there's a lot that does have to be done by a team, but there's also ways to make the team more efficient. And so that's when we've implemented different tools. So for instance, I use Zapier for a lot of administrative tasks, especially the onboarding process. That process has probably been cut down by like 2 or 3 hours when I'm onboarding a new client, because I have all these zaps going, entering their information into different places, because a human doesn't need to do that. And setting up our Slack channel and setting up the Asana project, all of that is automated when a client signs on with us. So it's like even if it's just 5 minutes here and there, it can really add up. And so that's one of the things that I've done. And then I'm constantly making sure that like the team is utilizing our software to the best capabilities. So we all maintain a certification with Xero, and you're required to go through these knowledge checks every quarter when they release new. And so the team all watches those and makes sure that our process is utilizing all the features that will make us the most efficient and things like that. And then we also operate on standard operating procedures. So this is one of the reasons why I only use Xero, because my team is more efficient because they don't have to switch between QuickBooks and Xero anymore. They can just know Xero really well and all the features within it. And then the other aspect of that is the niche that we have. So I didn't used to have a niche. I would help all business owners in any industry. And that was making us really inefficient because anytime a bookkeeper sat down with one of the clients, you have to it's a context switch. So it's like, now I have to change what I'm thinking because this is a totally different industry. So there's all different types of transactions now versus having one industry you work with. Like you're seeing basically the same vendors and everything come through everyone's books.
So
So
what's your niche today?
online business. So we work only with online course creators, e-commerce, and coaches, consultants. So yeah.
It's very smart to do this because it's just like with any task. If you're going from one thing to the other and it's not streamlined, it definitely takes away a lot of productivity and your focus. So I think that's really smart to be able to have one area of specialties here. And that also tells your clients or your prospects if they're a fit for you or not, and
Mhm.
vice versa, right at the get-go.
Yeah.
So, speaking of who gets to work with you, what is the experience like with working with your team? So, someone's hearing this and they're thinking, I need a bookkeeper. What would it be like to work with you all?
Yeah, so I'm still the one that onboards all of the clients. So I do all of the discovery calls slash sales calls, whatever you want to call them. I meet with the clients and potential clients initially, and then I set up the onboarding. So I'm the person that's getting them integrated into our systems. We convert people over from QuickBooks if they're on QuickBooks, but we do the migrations for free because that's how much the tool matters to us. I'm like, just make it easy and seamless for them on the front end. So I'm the one that handles any of those currently, migrations and onboarding. And then once everything is set up, we'll do an onboarding call and I'll show you like, this is how you'll access Xero. This is where you can find the reports, but we also send them to you. If you're going to be like invoicing your clients or anything that you're going to need to get into the system for, I'll show you how to do that. We show you how to use the tools that we're providing to upload receipts and all that kind of stuff. And on that call, I usually try to have one of the bookkeepers on the call with me. So it's kind of a handoff also where the client gets to meet who's going to be handling their books. And then from that point forward, once we have a process established, I hand the bookkeeping over to one of my bookkeepers. And then I also have an account manager who will also be taking over reviewing the books at that point and presenting the financials to the client each month. So that could look like an email with bullet points or a Loom video or a meeting, depending on which package you're in.
It sounds like a really well oiled and well thought out machine over here, but in a personalized way, not just a robotic way, you
Yeah,
know?
it's still a small team.
Yeah.
You're still going to have the same bookkeeper. We don't pass people around. I guess as the company grows, my vision would be to have multiple pods of teams handling groups of clients. So it's still like continuity between the team. And the most you're ever going to talk to is 3 different people. You will talk to me, the account manager, and the bookkeeper.
Well, that's where your controller days are coming back in. Like you have everything thought out, ready to go for not only what it looks like today, but also what it's going to look like down the road
Yeah.
because it's going in that direction. It's really exciting. So, I also have to ask because a lot of the people that are listening to this are either looking to start a business or relatively new in their entrepreneurial journey and of having their own online business here. So, at what point would you recommend that they take that step in hiring a bookkeeper like yourself?
Yeah, this is a question that gets asked a lot, and it's not necessarily about like a revenue number or anything like that. It's more about like what type of person you are and knowing yourself. So if you know that you're not going to keep up on things and looking at all of this makes you super anxious, then probably hire a bookkeeper as soon as you can afford it. But there's even options for you if it's not in your budget yet to hire someone ongoing. There's options like doing it yourself and having a bookkeeper look over it every quarter or at the end of the year and then helping you clean some stuff up. We offer that for clients as well. We have a few clients that only come to us at the end of the year because they're handling it themselves pretty well and they don't really have it in their budget to be paying a bookkeeper every month. And so they give us access at the end of the year. We look through it, make sure it's good to go. We'll make some corrections if needed. And that gives them the peace of mind. And then if there's any training opportunities, like, hey, we noticed you booked this same transaction incorrectly all year. Let me show you how to do it. We'll do that too for you.
That's so nice. Well, if someone's listening to this and thinking, okay, I need what she has to offer, where could they go and find out more?
Yeah, ofcoursefinancial.com. That's my website. It's got all the information of how to work with us and different options. There's also a DIY bookkeeping downloadable that you can grab at ofcoursefinancial.com/guide. And that's a great place to start too if you are brand new to this, like in your first year.
And I'm also going to add that you have your own podcast.
Yes, I
So
do.
the Ambitious Bookkeeper. So go give that a listen to, since obviously you're a podcast fan over here. But Serena, it has been such a wonderful conversation. I know it's one that I needed to have, and also a wake up call to get my booty in shape here, and not the physical shape, the number shape.
Yeah,
So
well, it's that time of the year, so.
believe me, I know. But anyways, so last piece of advice for anyone that's listening to this and is dreaming of starting their business or relatively new in their journey, what kind of advice would you give them?
I would say don't overthink it. If you're thinking of starting a business, obviously you have some sort of skill or talent to be able to offer people. So my advice would be to not overthink it, but also do your market research and make sure there's a need and people out there that are going to be your customers, because especially in like a physical brick and mortar sense, I've seen those businesses not do so great because they didn't do proper market research. So especially if you're thinking of starting a physical business, really do your market research. But yeah, don't overthink it too much. Just like, and get scrappy. You don't have to. I didn't have a perfect onboarding system when I first started. It did not look the way it looks now. It was me just submitting proposals on Upwork and saying, I would love to help you with this, and just kind of winging it.
Look
So
where it's got you.
yeah.
Yeah, and now you have that flexible business that you honestly, from the very beginning of our conversation, you were looking for flexibility to be able to be a present mom. And look at what you've been able to create. It's like a full circle moment, right?
Yeah, it's wild. I
It's
have this
wild.
little note I have it on my notes app, but it's like a pinned note. And I was just looking at it today because I don't always open it up, but I was looking at it right before this call. And at the very top of it, it says, I'm living the dream I always wanted. So it's like a reminder of like to remember that that's what's like when things are hard, like that's what I have to go back to. Like I'm actually living the dream I always wanted. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a wonderful place to end here.
Yeah.
So I hope that everyone can have those same sentiments as you do, because I think it's possible if we just go for it.
I agree.
Serena, thank you so much for hopping onto the Self-Starter Podcast today and sharing such wonderful stories, but also such great business tips as well.
Thank you so much for having me.